Hey friends, welcome to Shigaraki. So today we are gonna see, what if Deku had the illusory domain Quirk? So before we start, check out my Patreon page for 18+ exclusive mature content. We will now proceed to the video. He'd always wanted to be a hero, to save people with a smile, just like his idol All Might. Despite this, his 4th birthday came and went without a quirk manifesting. A quick doctor's appointment and one X-ray later led him to being diagnosed as quirkless despite single joint in his pinky toe. Heartbroken and dreams crushed, he watched videos of All Might in an attempt to cheer himself up, not that it worked very well. School became a nightmare to go to with all the bullying, not that any teachers cared enough to stop or even prevent it from happening, while his mother became more worried and stressed for him with each passing day. Most days he wanted to stay home and lie in bed with no cares in the world, but those fantasies were always pushed aside as he forced himself out of bed so that he could get ready for school. Each day when he arrived at school he was greeted with whispers about him followed by muffled laughter. Next came Bakugo Katsuki, the unofficial king of the school despite his age due to his powerful and flashy quirk. "What do you think you're doing, Deku?" The growl started him into freezing. Still as a statue he waited for the pain. Running away only made it worse despite what his instincts told him to do. A warm hand clasped his shoulder and the temperature rose till his uniform sizzled and he could feel his skin underneath burn. Answer me, loser." Deep breaths. "I was re-reviewing notes for C class." "These don't look like notes from class." In fact, he paused to snatch the notebook from his flailing grasp. "These look like notes on quirks." He didn't verbally respond but turned his head in shame. He didn't even know why he was feeling that way, that someone had found out his hobby. "Huh. You even have notes on what your quirk could be. What a loser, you're quirkless. There's no way a quirk would manifest 6 years late." Tears threatened to fall, but he refused to satisfy Bakugo despite all the insecurities he was digging into. Is this heat absorption? A mix of your mom's gravitational quirk and your dad's fire-breathing quirk? You don't even know your own father. I mean, come on, he's been out of your pathetic life so long you probably don't even remember what he even looks like. Like he's probably a villain or some shit and you wouldn't even know. I mean, I don't blame him. If I had a son as pathetic as you, I'd leave as well. He hit the last nail on the head and tears freely fell down his face. He didn't even need to look up to see Bakugo smirking victoriously as the sound of an explosion rang in his ears before the smell of burnt paper filled the air. "You'll never be a hero, Deku, remember that." By then the rest of the class had settled waiting for the teacher as they watched the interaction, not even bothering to hide their laughter anymore. He wasn't sure how much more of this he could take. The teacher came in after a couple minutes and, if he had to guess, was waiting for the tension to die down a bit before entering. The classes dragged on and he could still hear people talking about him and this newest incident despite his best efforts to block it all out. The sound of the lunch bell was a relief but also nerve-wracking since this would be the time where the rest of the school would hear about what happened. Quickly packing his things he left as soon as he could and headed to the one place no one bothered him, the school roof. No one was allowed up there, but it didn't matter since none of the teachers saw him as someone to break the rules and the locks were easy to pick. A cool breeze greeted him when he arrived and he let out an audible sigh of relief at finally being alone. The sun was out with a few clouds dotting the sky and the view from the roof was an okay sight to stare at. The roof itself was ill-maintained and looked like no one had looked after it in decades. But that was fine with him, it was a sort of sanctuary for him after all. From here he could spot Bakugo and his lackeys walking around, probably trying to find him, and several others from his class in their friendship groups most likely going over what happened earlier, and suddenly the ground seemed rather inviting. Not being down there with the rest of his class, but rather the trip down from where he was. Maybe he would shock his classmates, make them think twice about picking on someone. Probably not. They might not even realize he was gone or that he'd hit the ground till his body started to decay. A dark laugh escaped him. The temptation to end it all was right there in front of him and all he had to do was take a couple more steps and he'd be free of it all. Free of the constant torture that was living. The thought of his mother came to mind, but there were others who cared for her enough for him not to be completely worried. A satisfied smile graced his lips as he took a step forward. 2 more and he'd be free. It would be unfortunate for him not to meet All Might or become a hero himself, but Bakugo was right, there was no way he'd become a hero as a useless no one. And he took another step. Not to mention that All Might was considered the #1 hero, the pillar of peace, the strongest hero. There were probably millions of other people that wanted to meet him while thousands already have, and it wasn't like he would remember him. He wasn't special, cool, or strong. One last step and he felt himself fall. He was unnaturally calm and the wind rushing past his ears covered the sounds of screams from below. Finally, he would be free. Darkness, it surrounding him. Not suffocating like he'd expected, but oddly soothing like he was asleep and he never wanted to wake up. Occasionally he'd hear something like a muffled voice echo around him, but he couldn't make out any of the words. It was rather annoying in his opinion, and he just wanted to sleep. It wasn't till later that he began to feel things as well, like a warmth on his hand, forehead, or light nudges on his shoulder. Just like the voices, it was annoying and he wanted it to stop, but he wasn't sure how, and it wasn't frequent enough for him to be too concerned about it. Sometimes the muffled voices and the nudges or warmth would come together, other times they would be separate and he didn't know if it meant anything in particular, but he didn't really care all that much either. All too suddenly, light began to return to him and chased the comfortable darkness away from him. Weight began to seep into his body and made him feel heavy, his eyelids in particular. He still didn't want to open them no matter how persistent the feeling became, till it became overbearing and he caved. He couldn't see much at first, the white light was blinding. It only took a couple seconds for his eyes to adjust to the light and his eyes were soon open again. While his head still felt too heavy to move, he could still move his eyes to look around at where he was. The ceiling and walls were both a bright white, so was the sheet that was on top of him. Expensive-looking equipment looked to be hooked into him with a faint beep every so often that it took a while for his brain to even register it was even there. He could also see a window with drawn curtains and a wooden door on the other side of the room. He wanted to frown in confusion, but everything still felt heavy, even his eyelids began to want to be closed. The next time he opened his eyes, he noticed that everything felt less heavy and that he could move his head and face more freely. The curtains were also open and he could see buildings and a couple trees, even some bird flying in the distance. The creak of an opening door made him turn his head to see a woman in a white coat and glasses enter the room. "So you're awake again. I noticed that it seemed you woke up last night and contacted your mother, who should be here in a couple minutes or so." He looked at the doctor and frowned. He couldn't really understand where he was and why. The last thing he remembered was, oh, he'd walked right off the roof of his school. Shouldn't he be dead? The doctor must have noticed his predicament and began to explain. "Almost everyone at your school noticed you falling, and one of your teachers called an ambulance while another got the school nurse to try and stabilize you the best he could. After the ambulance brought you away, the police came to investigate the cause, but no one really gave anything of substance. Your school is still currently under supervision from the Board of Education and will probably continue to be under observation for a long time. You ended up in a coma for 2 weeks. Of course, it wasn't like the school was going to out themselves for allowing kids to get away with inappropriate usage of quirks and ignoring any bullying. But somehow he couldn't quite bring himself to say anything either. Who knows what would happen to him if they found out he did? A knock in the door interrupted his thought and he turned to look at his mother shyly enter the room before seeing him awake and dashing over and smothering him in a hug. "I'm sorry. I didn't know what was going on. I'm so sorry," she cried, tears rolling down her cheeks as she held onto him like he was a lifeline. He let her hold him but didn't return the embrace. She continued to apologize to him softly till the doctor was able to convince her to let go. However, as soon as she did and look into his eyes, the world around him seemed to freeze before he was forced to watch himself fall from the school roof as his mother cried next to him. One of his teachers had come over and checked his pulse before shaking his head. He cried out that the body being carried off wasn't him and that he was right next to her, but it seemed that no body could hear him. The world faded to black and he found himself staring into his Mother's grief-stricken eyes. He let out a strangled sob and screwed his eyes shut, shacking off his mother's arms. What happened? The doctor asked, sounding confused. Had she not seen that horrible nightmare? I just saw Izuku commit suicide. His mother shakily replied. Does he have a quirk? No. The doctor said he didn't have a quirk when he was 5. Does he have one pinky toe joint? Ah yes, he does. Then I believe that Izuku here has just manifested his quirk. It's rare, but there have been cases of people believed to be quirk-less suddenly gaining a quirk. It's thought that some quirks only appear under certain conditions such as extreme stress. Now we just have to find how it activates and what it does. Now Izuku, I need you to look at me, okay? He nodded and slowly opened his eyes and looked at the doctor. Everything seems to be normal so far. Inko, tell me the last thing you remember seeing before he activated his quirk? Well, I was looking straight into his eyes before. She trailed off, not wanting to repeat what she'd seen, and he guessed that she was shaken by it. Right. The doctor turned her gaze back to his eyes, but still nothing happened. Maybe my glasses are getting in the way. The second the glasses were gone, he felt time freeze one more before seeing a plane full of people beginning to sink into the ocean. He watched as the people inside panicked. For a second he thought he saw the doctor lady inside trying to help, but to no avail. From his place floating just above the water, he sobbed at being able to do nothing but watch till the plane finally sunk below the watery surface. And if none of that ever happened, the world returned to normal as he found himself staring at the doctor. I think I understand. Your quirk makes the other see their worst fears in an illusion when you make eye contact with them. But it seems that you can't use your quirk if there is something in between, such as glasses. He nodded in understanding, but that didn't mean that he had to like it. It was several weeks before he was officially allowed to leave the hospital, since he was still considered a risk to himself. His time was mainly filled by sleep, therapy, and other hospital-like activities. Despite all the calmness around him, there was always that nagging voice that reminded him that it wasn't going to last and that he would eventually have to go back to school and face everyone there. Many teachers and even the principal had tried to visit, but they were always turned away by hospital staff so that he could focus on healing his mind. The doctor always told him who tried to visit and when, and he was glad that he didn't have to face them just yet, even if he had to eventually. When he was finally released from the hospital, they provided his mum his medication for him to take every morning after breakfast, a pair of simple black glasses, and several future appointments to check on how he was going along. He still hadn't fully explained why he did what he did. The psychiatrist assigned to him and was vague when it came to his tormentors and what they did to him. He still didn't know why himself, but he didn't feel comfortable talking about his innermost feelings to anyone. At home, he sat on the couch and began watching the news, wanting to see updates on his favorite heroes, with his glasses sitting snug on his nose. On the dining table was a stack of notes and homework that apparently Bakugo was forced to bring for him while he was in the hospital. He knew that his mother had been through it all to make sure there was nothing that would set him off, or any notes that teachers might have slipped in for him to read. He was grateful for it, really, and was glad that his mum was taking time out of her day to really take good care of him. Not that she didn't before, despite what he'd technically shown her with his new quirk. He hadn't tried anything with his quirk yet, too traumatized to even think about using it. I'm making katsudon for dinner tonight. Did you want anything while you wait? His mum asked, appearing from the kitchen. No, thank you. He could hear a slight sigh and wondered if he had upset his mum, but was distracted by the debut of a new hero. Kamui Woods, he called himself, a fitting name for a hero with a wood-based quirk in his opinion. His fingers itched to start writing notes from what he could observe, but forced himself to relax, cringing at the memory of the notebook Bakugo had stolen and violated his privacy. The report was over quickly, and he was thankful that he didn't have to think about it for very long. A knock on the door made him flinch, and he looked hopefully at his mum to see what she was going to do. Go to your room and I'll sort this out, okay? He nodded in thanks as he left the running and headed to his room. All Might stared at him from the posters that littered his walls and the several figurines lying around. The smile and simple catchphrases cheered him up a little, but didn't do much to quench the fear that had settled like a stone in his mind since the awakening of his quirk. Muffled yelling began to fill his ears and he would know that voice anywhere. Bakugo had come to visit. He must have seen them arrive back and was probably forced by his mother to come over, not that it would do much good. The yelling ceased after a slap shortly followed by the slamming of their front door. He wasn't sure exactly why, but he couldn't stop himself from crying. It might have been the feeling of being overwhelmed, fear, or just straight up sadness. He just didn't know what to do with himself. His mother must have heard him since she opened his door and sat next to him on his bed. Not saying anything but just holding him close and letting him cry, something that he just needed to do at the moment. When his sobs became sniffles and his tears dried, his mother finally let go, leaving only a lingering arm on his shoulder. "I don't know what to do anymore," he admitted in a whisper. "It's okay. You can do whatever you want. I don't even know what I want." "Do you still want to be a hero?" "I think so." He frowned. "But I'm not sure if someone like me could even become a hero." "Of course you can. You might not see it now, but you have a heart of gold and all of the greatest heroes need to be able to care for others." He wasn't sure how to reply, disagree and tell her she's wrong, or agree and feel like he was lying to himself. So instead he opted to say nothing and just snuggle closer. It had taken months for him to return to school, with the previous year ending and the next one already underway. Fortunately, he was allowed to technically stay with his class while being at home as long as he did all the homework and assignments on time. During that time, the police investigation came to a close with nothing to show for it, but the school itself was still being closely watched by the local community. He had returned to school looking different, bright red glasses that almost looked too big for him and dorky red shoes to match. Looking closer, the dark circles under his eyes, partially hidden by the glasses, and the even jumper attitude showed a change mentally. Not that anyone cared to look that closely. The whispering started up again and rumors about him spread like wildfire, ranging from scarily accurate like he had gotten a quirk, some things that had been kept a secret from the students and most of the staff, to absolutely ridiculous like he was a ghost haunting the school or he was simply a robot. The whole atmosphere had been tense, with not even Bakugo saying anything to him for 2 months. Another couple years pass with a few specific bullying instances, but nothing that led to anything as drastic as when he'd walked off the roof. That was until the teacher was talking about their high school applications. Of course, everyone in the class wanted to be heroes, but when the teacher announced that Bakugo wasn't the only one to apply for UA, that the situation took a nosedive. "I'm going to be the only one from this shitty school to get into UA, so stay out of my way." Bakugo and his lackeys cornered him after school. "I'm just applying. Don't, or you'll regret it. I'm going to be the #1 hero and I don't need a shit stain like you to try and hold me back." Out the window went another burnt notebook. He wanted to cry, but that would mean that Bakugo had won. Deep breaths calmed him and he closed his eyes and counted to 10 just to make sure. Bakugo had already left by then, but it just meant that he could pack up and find his notebook in peace. When he finally found his notebook, he found all the writing inside was either burnt or soaked from its landing in the koi pond. He found that he didn't want to go home just yet and decided to take a less direct route to delay the inevitable question of why his notebook looked like it had been in a campfire then dropped in a pool. He couldn't help but notice that it was a rather nice day with a warm sun, cool breeze, and sparse clouds in the sky. Walking under a bridge, he felt the air become damp and cooler and he began to feel a little more uneasy. It wasn't the same kind of uneasiness he got when Bakugo was angry, but rather like someone was watching him. So when he heard the sound of a moving manhole cover, he turned before freezing at the sight of the slime villain. "You'll make the perfect meat cover." The villain grinned before leaping at him with the intent on suffocating him. His survival instincts kicked in and he thrashed about, wanting to breathe again, causing his glasses to fall and land to the side. Fear caused him to freeze up and close his eye. The villain noticed and began to chuckle victoriously. The ringing in his ears became dampened and the familiar comforting darkness that he'd felt before returned to him. It wasn't as comforting this time though, but it was enough to feel like he wanted to be lost in it again when it vanished and he could feel someone trying to wake him. His eyes opened to notice the #1 hero, All Might, staring at him. His eyes widened in shock before remembering that his glasses had come off during the struggle. But it was too late, the world had frozen and he found himself in what seemed to be a wasteland at first before he noticed that this was in fact a destroyed city. Dead bodies filled gaps in the rubble and practically lined the street, leaving him gagging at the sight. In front of him were two people. A vaguely familiar blonde man facing off against a man in a black mask and suit. "Look at how pathetic you are. You can't even save all these people. You are destined to fall before me, All Might. All the successors of One for All will die by my hand, and there's nothing you can do to stop any of this," the masked man declared, looking down upon the frail-looking blonde. His eyes widened. Was this blonde All Might? But he looked so lanky, nothing like the strong and muscular hero. He didn't understand what was going on when All Might fell to his knees. One for All's reign ends right here and now. The world returned to normal just after the illusionary All Might was killed by the masked man. Immediately he shut his eyes, but it still didn't stop the tears. I'm sorry, he repeated to the number one hero. What just happened? My Quirk. It lets me see someone's fears. That's why I have to wear glasses. Several minutes seemed to pass before he heard All Might get up and start moving away. At first he thought that the number one hero was disgusted with him for learning what he feared most, but the thought didn't last long when the hero returned and he felt the familiar feeling of his glasses being slid into place. They're a bit cracked up, All Might confessed before he opened his eyes once more. It's okay. I'm sorry, it's alright my boy, I just have to ask that you keep everything you saw to yourself. He nodded his head vigorously. He always made sure to keep whatever he saw private on the few occasions he'd used his quirk. All Might, can I ask you a question? Of course, but please make it quick if you can. Suddenly a cloud of smoke covered All Might and dissipated to reveal the skinny blonde man he saw in the illusion. Never mind. Well, I only just got my quirk a couple years ago, All Might's curiosity piqued. But every time I look someone in the eyes without my glasses on, I see their worst fears. I don't know how to control it, and I don't know where I should even start. But I want to help others, someone who can help others with a smile. Just like you. Do you think I can do it? It's a difficult question to answer. A quirk like yours is very powerful but also dangerous, not only to your allies but also to yourself. You would have to put a lot more effort into your training, more so than your peers, just to get some sort of control over your quirk. If you're really sure about becoming a hero, then I'd have to recommend that you apply for UA, where there are several powerful pros that can help you. His eyes began to water. Not only did someone finally believe that he could be a hero, it was his idol and the number one hero too. It was finally time for the UA entrance exams. After being told that he could become a hero by All Might, he began training his body in the hopes of building some muscle and had taken to community service to do so. He started off doing all the chores around his house, then moved on to cleaning up parks before moving to begin cleaning up the beach near his home. It was a big job, but he managed to finish the day before the exam. It was a good way to be active, and it also took his mind off of everything he still had to put up with at school. He'd also replaced his glasses and gotten a blue pair that his mum thought complemented his hair and eyes. Staring up at the gates almost felt enlightening, almost like he'd found all the answers to questions he didn't know he had until now. Get out of my way, Deku. The gruff and familiar voice made him freeze on instinct before he was able to calm himself slightly and turn to see Bakugo walking up behind him. He was able to move to the side but wasn't able to say anything. A sigh of relief flooded him when he was sure Bakugo was gone and headed back towards the exit, only to trip over his own feet. He expected his face to painfully greet the pavement but was surprised to see himself floating. I'm sorry I used my quirk on you without asking, but I think would have been bad luck to trip before the exams started. A feminine voice apologized. Looking up, he was able to spot the petite girl that had prevented him from falling and nodded gratefully. It's kind of nerve-wracking, isn't it? Well, I'll see you inside then. She walked off towards the entrance after writing him and deactivating her quirk, and all he could do was dumbly stare after her for a second. He was about to also make his way to the entrance when a gruff voice called out to him. Are you Midoriya Izuku? The man was tall, scruffy, and looked like he hadn't had a proper night's sleep in weeks, kind of like himself. The other teachers and I saw your application and it'd be best if you come with me, the man added before walking off in a different direction. He stared longingly at the front entrance before following the man to wherever their destination was. As it turned out, he was being taken to a different classroom and was greeted by another boy that looked his age. Now listen up, you two. I know both of you applied to be in the Heroes course, however your quirks are unfit for the examination that they are having. Instead, you can take the written test for General Education Department and hope to be transferred to the Hero class after the sports festival. That, or you can leave and apply to a different school. I'll give you both 5 minutes to decide, but when I come back I expect answers. The man left the both of them and headed off to who knows where. He turned to the boy who looked frustrated and wondered if he should start a conversation, but it seemed he didn't have to make the decision. Shinso Hitoshi. You are? Oh, Izuku Midoriya. It's to meet you. Hitoshi frowned slightly. If you don't mind me asking, what's your quirk? Mine is that I can brainwash people into doing what I say as soon as they reply to me. That's so cool. I wish my quirk was as cool as yours. My quirk shows people's fears as illusions when I make eye contact without my glasses on. You answered me even though I told you how my quirk works. Why wouldn't I? Most people don't. Hitoshi paused. Well, from what I can tell, the exam must not be against people if they don't think we could handle the exam. I know I'm going to stay here and try to get transferred. What about you? I think I'll do the same. You two have to actually pass the exam first. The gruff man returned. The test for the general education students is normally next week, but since you two wanted to be heroes, you two can take the tests now. They both nodded and were each handed a paper test filled with questions from different subjects. There was no talking aloud, but they both finished relatively quick. Next was the physical side, where they had to do sprints and other typical tests. He was rather thankful for the community service he did now, since he was able to put up a decent fight. Your two are done for today. You'll get your results next week and maybe you'll be able to come back. He found himself standing in front of the UA gates once more. Not as a student of the Hero course, but rather General Studies Department. He'd stopped going to junior high after being accepted in fear of running into Bakugo. His mother had fought with the principal to let him do as he pleased and thankfully won the heated debate when she threatened to contact the police with information on the culprits in regards to the incident a couple years back. Obviously they didn't want to ruin the chances of their ace getting into the most prestigious high school and said nothing. Bakugo himself had tried to come over when the news broke that both of them were going to UA, but his mom wouldn't let him past the door. The halls and doors were enormous and he guessed that they were designed that way for those who had a jauntification quirk. How thoughtful. He found himself walking past classes 1A where his instincts told him Bakugo was. Apparently this hallway was for those in the heroics department, meaning he was lost. Should he head back or maybe ask for directions? Scratch that. Everyone here looks like they're too busy and it's not like he wants to talk to anyone in the first place. Backtracking, he was able to get a good look at some of the students heading for the hero strict, like this strict-looking guy with engines on his legs, the girl that helped him in the entrance exams who unfortunately didn't seem to notice him, and several others with interesting attributes. He even saw a gruff-looking man in a yellow sleeping bag making his way down the hall. Finally, he was able to make his way to his new class, Class E, where he hoped he wouldn't have the same problems he did before. Outside the classroom, he took a deep breath before entering. Most of the students were already there talking quietly amongst each other, and he was given no more than a quick look over by those that noticed him. So far so good. A familiar tired face caught his gaze. Quickly he looked away, uncomfortable with the staring, when he noticed that already on the board were the seating arrangements. Looking for his name, he found that he was sat behind Hitoshi. Turning back to the boy, he slowly made his way over, unsure of himself, till he made it to his seat. Are you always this nervous, or is it just me that you're scared of? Hitoshi asked, startling him. No, it's just, I'm not too comfortable lots of people, Izuku admitted, though he was proud that he was stuttering less. Good to know. So, do you know anyone else going to UA? Babaku Goke Ka Stuki. Hizinth the her heroics depa department. ANU? And there goes his improvement, he internally sighed. Sounds like you're not a big fan of this guy. Hitoshi started. As for knowing anyone, not really. I have heard rumors that there are quite a few prestigious kids are attending this year. The bell sounded as he was about to reply and President Mike walked into the room leaving everyone shell-shocked. They all knew that there were heroes teaching at UA, but to have one teaching them as well? Good morning, little listeners. President Mike exclaimed. To start with, we all need to head to the auditorium for orientation. He added when the murmuring students stopped. With that, all the students got up and followed the hero down the many halls till they arrived at the auditorium. It looked like they were the first ones here and most people took it as a sign to socialize a little more before everything started. Currently he was standing next to Hitoshi, but neither of them really had anything to say, so they stayed silent. Hey, do you guys know each other or something? Did you go to the same school? A female voice interrupted the silence with genuine curiosity. He looked to Hitoshi to answer since he wasn't used to people. No, we met at the entrance exams. Funny, I don't remember seeing either of you there. The girl hummed. Yurisa Sato. Nice to meet ya. Shinso Hitoshi. Hitoshi replied. I'm Izuku Midoriya. Nice to meet you too. Ah, aren't you just adorable? Sato grinned at him. It's okay, I don't bite. Promise. She had purple hair that looked to be tied in two hollow buns and had big, bright blue eyes. Sato, what are you doing? A boy sighed nearby. Sato huffed and turned to the boy. Yuki, I told you to call me Yuri. Firstly, don't call me that, and secondly, I don't want to. The boy with light blue skin, elf-like ears, and dark blue hair rolled his teal eyes before turning to him and Hitoshi. Yukamura Takanibu. A pleasure, and I already heard your names, no need to reintroduce yourselves. He had to fight the urge to hide behind Hitoshi with how uptight and strict this new guy seemed. Interesting, I've heard the name Takanibu before, Hitoshi thought aloud. Takanibu sighed. Unfortunately, I don't doubt that. My father works as Endeavor's PR. Unfortunately? Hitoshi questioned. Yes. I don't really enjoy the attention that comes with lots of people knowing who I am. By now the auditorium was pretty much full and he could see the teachers lined up on stage, though he wasn't able to tell the others as much when President Mike took center stage. Good morning, everybody. Please welcome the principal. President Mike announced before wildly gesturing off stage where a dog, bear, mouse, entered and made their way to the center. Good morning, students. I am Principal Nedzu, and whether I'm a mouse, a bear, or a dog is the biggest mystery, but the only important thing is that I'm the principal. Principal Nedzu went on and on for some time. Some of the students had ended up turning to each other and whispering. None of the teachers called the out on this, but it was easy to see that they were disappointed in the behavior. That is all for today. I thank you for your attention. The principal finished up and walked off stage with a knowing smile on his face. Less than a week had passed and not once has he been bullied or had thoughts of staying home. Honestly, UA was leagues above his old school, not that he told anyone. He didn't want to know how they would react to all of it and he didn't want to be left alone again. Sato, though she kept telling everyone to call her Yuri, and Takanibu had joined him and Hitoshi in making a sort of friendship group. He wasn't really sure if that was the right term, but he guessed that what it was called didn't really matter much. I totally forgot. Yuri had gasped one day during their lunch break, startling them. What is it now? Takanibu groaned out. We don't even know each other's quirks. How could we forget? Hitoshi looked between him and Yuri. Well, maybe it's not really important? Wrong. It's totally important. I'm dying to know now. Yuri stood up, hands flat on the table as she looked at between everyone. Everyone was exchanging glances while Yuri looked at them accusingly. Fine, I'll go first then. My quirk is called Mimic and it lets me imitate other people's voices for a bit. My quirk is numb and I can withstand sub-zero temperatures with no discomfort. Takanibu went next. Well, my quirk is called Illusion. If I make eye contact without my glasses I show people their worst nightmares. He managed to explain without stuttering too much. He looked away, not wanting to see what they thought of him now. Guess I have to now. Hitoshi sighed. My quirk is mind control. Anyone that verbally replies to me I can put them under my control. He heard a sharp intake of air and immediately felt bad for Hitoshi, who must have put up with so much because of his quirk. That's such a powerful quirk. Like you could be a hero with a quirk like that, Yuri cheered. Indeed. With a quirk like yours you could help evacuations without people arguing, take in villains without a fight. Takanibu praised subtly. Hitoshi's eyes were almost comically wide. You really think so? Let me guess, everyone has told you how villainous a quirk like yours is. When Hitoshi nodded, Takanibu continued. Typical. There is no such thing as a villainous quirk or a heroic quirk. All that matters is how someone uses their quirk. You've put a lot of thought into this, he surprised himself by saying. When you've seen the things I have, then you begin to think. Takanibu gave a small tired smile. As for you Midoriya, there is something I don't understand. You have a powerful quirk. You may not like it but it's true. However you act doesn't let anyone think you do. Oh my goodness, that's so true. I thought you were just embarrassed or like nervous about your quirk. Yuri butted in. He started. I don't want to talk about it, he whispered. I think you should leave it there. I don't know what's going on but it's probably serious if he doesn't want to talk about. Hitoshi came to his defense. He was glad that they seemed to understand and leave him alone after that, but he couldn't help but think about if he should tell them. They were his friends, right? And they were accepting and supportive of Hitoshi's quirk, but there was something that just told him to be quiet. It was almost like the teachers from his old school were telling him to keep his mouth shut as to not ruin Bakugo's future. It was after they had all finished eating and were heading back to class early that they ran into All Might. His friends seemed shell-shocked to meet the #1 hero while he was nervous. Would the hero actually remember him? Unlikely. He was just one of probably thousands All Might has saved. No way. All Might is actually teaching here. I thought that was just a rumor. Yuki gaped. It's true. I am here as a teacher for the hero students. All Might laughed before suddenly stopping. Ah, my boy. I'm glad to see that you've recovered well. His thoughts paused. Why, you remember me? He asked shyly. Of course I do. You gave one hell of a first impression. All Might laughed again. Oh. I'm sorry. He apologized and All Might hummed in confusion. There's nothing to be sorry for, my boy. All Might ruffled his hair. Now, I have to be off. Goodbye. After All Might disappeared down the hall, Yuki squealed. He ruffled your hair. I'm so jealous. So, Hitoshi grinned. What did you do to make the #1 hero remember you? This I am also curious about. Takanibu added. Well, how was he supposed to explain this when he couldn't talk about All Might's fear? It was one of the last things he wanted to remember. I was attacked on the way home from SC school. I was almost suffocated by the time All Might rescued me. My glasses came off in the same struggle. He had to find them for me. He almost gagged while explaining. This probably wasn't what they were expecting when they asked, but well, now they knew. Yuki hugged him and he went stiff in her arms, not knowing what to do. He'd only really been hugged by his mum. Sato, you should probably let go. He'd never been so grateful for Takanibu. Sorry, it was just so sad. She sniffled, not quite crying. And Yuki, call me Yuri. She turned to playfully glare at Takanibu, who then rolled his eyes. It was a normal day in class, or was until the gruff man that had taken him from the hero exam came into the classroom. President Mike had called him Aizawa, but with a closer look he was able to identify the man as Eraserhead and had to bite his tongue from saying anything. The two teachers talked for a bit before President Mike turned around to look at the class. Okay, little listeners. Looks like Class 1A is heading to the USJ today and are in need of some civilians to help them. Lucky for you, Aizawa here is going to pick a couple of you and you get to skip class for a while. It's not skipping class, it's a different type of learning experience. Eraserhead mumbled before looking over the class. You, and you. Get your things and come with me. Eraserhead and pointed to him, Takanibu, Yuki, a girl named Shihori Sato, and a guy named Iwai Kazuo. Tell me how it went when you get back, Hitoshi asked before he left, and he nodded. Soon enough the five of them and Eraserhead were outside the classroom and were heading outside to where apparently a bus was waiting for them. I guess I should explain what you five are going to be doing today. The heroic students are going to be learning about rescues in different types of disasters. All Might thought that it would be beneficial to add civilians into the exercise. Despite the fact that we didn't need more students from a different class, the principal agreed, and so here you are. Eraserhead sounded almost bored with them, and it was easy to guess that the hero didn't want any of them there. Once outside, the five of them stood together while the heroic students began to trickle out to the bus in their costumes. His heart almost stopped when he saw one of the last students to arrive. Quickly, he had to hide before Bakugo saw him. Oi Deku, the do you think you're doing here? Bakugo snarled. Too late. The loudness of their classmate brought the attention of the whole of Class A, wondering who Bakugo was talking about. Stop hiding there and face me, you coward. Bakugo was pointing at him now, and even his classmates were looking at him in confusion. Deku? What's a Deku? Yuki asked, probably trying to diffuse some of the tension, but it didn't work. It took all his strength not to shrink away in fear as Bakugo came towards him. Not that he had much strength when it came to Bakugo. All it took was Bakugo grabbing him by the front of his shirt, and everyone knew that he was Deku. It didn't last too long though, as it seemed Eraserhead finally returned with the remaining students and didn't hesitate to completely put a halt to the situation. Bakugo, what do you think you're doing? Huh, that was new. This little thinks he can get away with hiding for months and then ruining everything. Bakugo screamed back, and everyone was confused, even him. We don't have time for this. Bakugo, since you started this, you'll sit in the front with me. Everyone else can sit where you want to. Oh, and Midoriya. I'll be talking to both of you separately after this. Eraserhead finalized and all but dragged Bakugo onto the bus with him. Midoriya, are you alright? Yuki asked as he stopped shaking. I'm okay. He mumbled, mostly to himself. The other 1A students seemed mostly confused, but at least they didn't seem hostile. The one that looked to be wearing a mecha suit started rounding everyone up, asking them to line up in their student numbers so they could board the bus in an orderly fashion. Not that it did much since it was an open layout on the bus. He sat near the back next to Takanibu while Yuri and Sato sat across from them with Kazuo just in front. He could hear some of the heroic students talking about what just happened with him and Bakugo, trying to figure it out, and he in turn tried to curl up in on himself more. He was mostly alright until one of them tried to ask him. Hey, Mr. Aizawa called you Midoriya, right? So, want to tell us what happened? The guy had red spiky hair and had shark-like teeth. He nervously started. We went TT to the same school when we were younger. All the while he could feel Bakugo's glare burning into his skull. Huh, so like childhood friends then? Another with mostly blonde hair asked. No way in hell would I be friends with that quirkless, Bakugo snarled. Midoriya isn't quirkless. Yuki yelled back, angry that someone was being hurtful to her friend. He was beginning to feel nauseous for the whole situation. He needed to get out of here. His breathing quickened and he could feel his heart rate increasing. His hands found his hair and he began to scratch and scratch, not that anyone noticed. They were too caught up in the debate going on around him. All of you be quiet. Your behavior is unfit for a hero. If you really want to know, then you can ask Midoriya in your free time, and whether he answers or not is up to him, and you have no right to pressure him to say anything. Next one to say anything about this while we are here will be expelled. Got it? Eraserhead threatened. Hair floating and eyes glowing red, making him look all the more intimidating. Why though? Why would a teacher stand up for him? It's never happened before. Holy shit, Midoriya, are you okay? Yuki quietly gasped when she looked over at him. Apparently he'd scratched so deep that he began to bleed onto his fingers and forehead. I'm okay. he whispered back, staring at the blood on his fingers. A few others in the back turned and noticed, like the girl that stopped him falling. He really had to stop referring to her like that and learn her name. A boy with both white and red hair, and a girl with black hair and a posh way of acting. The rest of the trip had been almost silent, and once they arrived the girl with the black hair had come up to him and handed some first aid supplies, though he had no idea where it came from. Both Yuki and Takanibu helped him clean up his hands and scalp as best they could, with Yuki joking about how he could really play the part of an injured civilian now. It helped a little. "Hey Midoriya. I know we haven't talked much in class, but we were wondering if you were okay?" Kazuo asked in concern. Kazuo had almost bright orange hair, light brown eyes that almost matched his glasses, and a sprinkle of freckles on his cheeks. "I'm okay," he repeated, just like every other time he was asked. But again it was more like he was trying to convince himself. "Are you sure? Do you want Mr. Aizawa to come look at it?" Soda asked. Her head tilted, but he shook his head. Soda had looked to not be from Japan, with her darker skin. Her hair was dark green, almost black in color, held back in a wavy ponytail, while her eyes were dark yellow and snake-like, just like her two sharp canine teeth, all from her quirk, which was appropriately named Snake. The Hero 13 took that time to come and welcome them all to USJ of the unforeseen simulation joint. Apparently All Might was already supposed to be here, since Eraserhead asked but was simply told he was too busy by 13, while the hero held up 3 fingers. He guessed that All Might must have used up all his time then. Just as 13 was finishing up a speech about the dangers of quirks, oh how he knew, and the proper way to go around practicing at USJ, a dark wisp appeared before expanding to let out hundreds of vicious-looking people. The redhead wanted to rush out there but was held back by Eraserhead, who explained that this wasn't a part of training before going down himself and dispatching all the villains he could. 13 on the other hand tried to get all the students out the door but was stopped by that same dark wisp-like substance. "Greetings heroes, we are the League of Villains and we heard that All Might was supposed to be here. Is he perhaps running late? It would be a shame if the welcome party we prepared wouldn't be able to properly greet him." The wisp, no quirk user, spoke. Bakugo and the redhead charged despite 13's warning, and they hit nothing as the wisps reformed themselves after they'd gone through. Suddenly the wisp surrounded them and he wasn't able to do anything but felt someone grab onto him. All too suddenly he felt himself falling and he braced for impact, but it never came. Opening his eyes he saw the boy with the red and white hair holding him. When the boy put him down he introduced himself as Shoto Todoroki. "And you're Deku Midoriya, right?" Todoroki asked. "And no I'm Izuku mi Midoriya." Todoroki shrugged and he looked around to see where they were. It looked like this was the landslide zone, but wait. "Takanibu," he called out when he saw the familiar face of his classmate surrounded by villains. Todoroki looked surprised but sent a wave of ice through the ground, capturing the villains before they could hurt anyone. When he was sure that the villains were frozen he raced over to his classmate who was staring at his feet. His eyes widened when he noticed that the ice was thinner around Takanibu. It had to have taken a lot of skill to make sure the villains were captured, but his classmate remained unharmed. "Ah, Todoroki. I should have guessed." Takanibu seemed uninterested in everything that was going on, but Todoroki stiffened at his name. "We should try to meet up with 13 or Mr. Aizawa." They all agreed. With Todoroki on the offensive they were able to make it out of the zone and to the central plaza with no difficulty. The plaza itself was a different story altogether, unfortunately. Before them Eraserhead was sprawled on the ground, laying in what appeared to be his own blood as a hulking figure pinned the hero. Off to the side by the shipwreck zone was Kuzo and 2 more 1A class students. The villain, covered in disembodied hands, was aggressively scratching at his own neck, muttering unintelligible things. He couldn't hear from where they stood, but they all knew that when the villain stopped his scratching, something bad was about to happen. Boy does he hate being right now. The villain, surprisingly fast, ran at Kuzo and the 2 other 1A students with his arm outstretched. "That was so cool, Eraserhead. You really are a cool hero." The villain seems giddy that Eraserhead was able to muster up enough strength to cancel whatever quirk he was about to use on Kazuo. It was lucky as they were able to get away from the villain in that brief moment of distraction. Eraserhead's face was slammed into the ground with a sickening thud, and he wanted nothing more than to go over and help. Apparently there was a lapse in judgment on his behalf since he was already running over. He cursed himself for being an idiot. There was nothing he could do in this situation. Lucky for him, All Might chose that moment to break down the doors, without a smile. It was terrifying. The speed the #1 hero used broke the sound barrier, but even so the man was careful, picking up Eraserhead and setting him down away from the fighting. The winds produced by such speed knocked him to the ground as his glasses slipped from his face and shattered on the ground in front of him. The villain growled and scratched at his neck again. Numu, kill All Might. He turned to look at the creature, regrettably making eye contact, and the world froze around them. But that should be possible. There's no way that thing is human. Yet his quirk activated like it was, and he was submerged in darkness. Screams and begging filled his ears, but he couldn't make out any actual words. His head spun and he felt like he was going to be sick. Then the pain started. It was like he was being speared with thousands of needles all over his body, then burned alive, and he screamed out in pain. It felt like hours or even days passed before he was in his own body, a screaming, crying mess as he scratched at his arms to make the phantom pain go away. Never before had he felt pain this bad. Shocking on air and not seeing anything as his mind couldn't let go of what he saw with his quirk. The sight of a white ceiling greeted him when he awoke, but he didn't remember falling asleep. What on earth happened? In fact, he couldn't really remember anything that happened. He felt glasses on his face, but they weren't his. These had a slight prescription to them, making everything look slightly blurry. The sound of a door opening roused him from his thoughts, and he turned his head to see Yuri and Hitoshi entering the room. What happened? He asked, startling both them and himself with how hoarse he sounded. You had us so worried about you, Yuri exclaimed as Hitoshi asked. You don't remember? I remember getting off the bus A at USJ-B, but then. He trailed off, his throat tight and sore. Yuri had tears in her eyes, and she came and sat in a chair by his bed. He was probably in the nurse's office, then he mused. We were attacked by villains and they separated us. You ran at one of the leaders, a guy covered in hands. Then after All Might arrived you started screaming. They said you could hear it from the entrance. After you passed out the big purple one wouldn't move and the hand guy got really angry and tried to get you. The rest of the teachers came and took down the rest of the villains, but the hand guy and mist guy got away. Kazuo lent you his glasses after I told him you needed them to protect yourself from your quirk. I didn't tell him what your quirk was in case you were wondering. Yuri explained with sniffles interrupting her words every so often. It all came back to him in a rush, making his head hurt. Hissing in pain, he brought a hand to his face in an attempt to try and stop the oncoming nausea the sensation brought. You used my quirko on it. He shuddered. I have never seen any like I had before. Maybe we should get a teacher. This sounds like it could be important for them to know, Hitoshi mumbled. I'll go, but you both have to stay right here. No moving or I swear I'm gonna. Yuri sniffled again before turning and leaving them alone. I kind of wish I was there, though I'm really glad I wasn't, Hitoshi admitted. I probably would have made this Bakago I keep hearing about rip himself a new one. Trying to lighten the mood. Don't let him hear why you see call hi him that or he'll never leave you us alone. He shuddered a little. I don't really care. He can't hurt us, especially so with all these heroes around. I don't know what it was like in your old schools, but UA is different. Hitoshi let out a small smile. They let a content silence fall between then before a few minutes later the door opened again. Present Mike and the principal joined Yuri. Midoriya, it's nice to see that you're up. The principal started. We were just considering sending you to the hospital for overnight observation when you woke up. Is everyone okay? He just needed to know. The principal seemed to contemplate telling him. 13 had their quirk used against them and is recovering in the hospital along with Eraserhead, who sustained the most damage to the fight. No need to worry about them as they are on the mend and none of the students received any major injuries. He let out a sigh of relief. On the other hand, I have already called your mother and told her what happened, and for your safety we would like to keep you here for the moment. Despite not being a student of the heroics department, you certainly have a way of capturing attention with your quirk. She'll be here to visit you tomorrow after she receives visitor's pass I sent. The principal continued on. Speaking of tomorrow, I was informed by Eraserhead that you and Bakugo seem to be on bad terms. I'd like to talk to you about it with your mother in hopes that we can make things here at UA enjoyable for you. Bakugo will also be spoken to about his behavior and given a warning, as we do not tolerate bullying, especially from our aspiring heroes. He didn't know when it started exactly, but he could feel tears falling down his cheeks. He knew that both Yuri and Hitoshi were staring as pieces of information fell into place. Rubbing his eyes didn't help much as more tears replaced the ones he'd wiped away. We'll leave you now, Sato. Hitoshi, don't stay too late now, the principal warned before leaving, with Present Mike trailing after him. Looking over his shoulder a couple times, probably trying to reassure himself that his student would be fine. The next day came all too quickly, and soon enough he was wrapped in his mother's arms, trying not to cry again. That didn't stop his mother from doing so, and soon enough they were crying together, probably making it awkward for Present Mike, who had escorted her here. A part of him didn't really care though, as he was still alive, and being held like this by his mother was proof of that. Thankfully the cry fest didn't last too long, and shortly after they were joined by the principal, who asked them all to join him in the staff lounge. To start off with, Ms. Midoriya, I have to apologize for the compromised safety of your son, and can promise that on behalf of all the teachers here at UA that we'll be doing everything in our power to ensure that this doesn't happen again. The principal bowed in a show of sincerity. I should hope so, not just for my son but the rest of the students that were there, his mum replied a little stiffly. But of course. A knock on the door sounded and the principal invited them in. Eraserhead walking in, covered from head to toe in bandages. Ah, just who I was expecting. Eraserhead didn't say anything, but it looked like he was tried to bow before taking a seat next to the principal. Now that all the participating parties are present, let's begin. To start with, I'd like to talk about your quirk status, Izuku. On the official reports we received, it states that it is classified. From my understanding, you were categorized as quirkless when it failed to manifest by your 5th birthday. All the students from your homeroom that we spoke to said you had a quirk but refused to use it on anyone, which is a smart choice from what the Class A students told us. Now, what is your quirk exactly? He looked up at his mum to see if she was going to answer for him, but she just gave a soft smile and put her arm protectively around him. Her way of saying that he should talk, but she'd intervene if it got too much. My key quirk is called illusion. By making eye contact I can see someone's worst knee nightmare while they're put you under the illusion. He looked down at his feet and chewed the inside of his cheek. And when did you manifest this quirk? Eraser inquiry muffled slightly through the bandages. When IW was 10. He debated how much he should explain, but the silence held an expecting weight, like they wanted him to elaborate. After I walked off my old school's RO roof, he added, quieter. His mother squeezed his shoulder comfortingly as he tried not to show how close he was to crying. Oh, I remember that case. A real shame they weren't able to get anything from the official case. Then again, that's just what they could publish. However, with your testimony, should you choose to, you could have the school put under another stricter observation period. The principal explained. Though that's not the point of this meeting. As I'm sure Eraserhead here is eager to ask, was Bakugo Katsuki a part of the reason for the extreme situation? He stiffened. It was probably obvious, but them asking meant they wanted to take action. His lack of answer and the look on his mother's face was all the answer they needed. If it would make you more comfortable, we could have Bakugo expelled and transferred to another school. Such behavior is unfitting for a UA student and cannot be tolerated, the principal warned. No, he exclaimed quickly. UUAI is his dream school. He's bet better, he added defensively. Present Mike and the principal looked doubtful, and it was hard to see Eraserhead's expressions. Still, the principal continued. Nonetheless, he will be given a warning and watched carefully. You may think he deserves this chance to be here, but many would probably kill to be in his spot. I'm sure reminding him of this will help speed this along. Should he speak to you again, no matter the subject or tone, find either myself or present Mike and we can help." He began to chew his cheek again but nodded regardless or how little it would matter in the end. "Next on the list, I wanted to know what your aspersions were. What would you like to be in the future?" I don't know," he admitted. "I want TT to help pay people. Truly a heart of gold." Present Mike sniffed as quietly as he could. "How would you like to help? As a policeman? A doctor perhaps? A hero?" His breath hitched and he nodded. The days after the disastrous training exercise went by slowly. No one was talking about anything else either. Those who weren't chosen to go kept badgering those that were. He had returned Kazuo's glasses and thanked him for the loan despite the boy saying it was no problem and that he hoped the prescription wasn't too much of a problem. His old glasses were found at the scene shattered and mangled from where the beast, the police were apparently calling it Nomu, had stepped in them. His new frames were a lime green that his mother had bought him, though he now also had a couple spares at home just in case. While he was at school he was bombarded with questions about what happened, and once it got out that he used his quirk, they began asking about that. The attention was driving him crazy, not that he would have said anything. Luckily Hitoshi was able to help him out of this predicament. "Class is about to start. If you don't want to get in trouble again, then I suggest you shut up and sit down," was how Hitoshi had bluntly put it, but it worked nonetheless. The piece was interrupted though when Present Mike paraded into the classroom with a "Good morning, little listeners." After setting down some papers he continued, "Today I have an important announcement. You all have 2 weeks until the UA Sports Festival." Takanibu raised his hand and waited till he was called upon before speaking. "Don't you think that maybe this isn't a good idea? Some of us were just attacked by villains." He had a valid point and some of the other students were whispering in agreement. "Nonsense. This is a perfect time to host it. It shows the villains that we weren't affected by their attack and that we are strong." Present Mike protested. "While a good point, the UA Sports Festival is a nationally televised event, meaning that anyone could watch it, including villains." Takanibu stunned the class with his point with how right it was. Those villains from the USJ attack may not have known the quirks that were present, but should they watch the event they would be able to learn and plan their next attack accordingly. Present Mike was starting to look rather nervous. "Well, you guys aren't a part of the hero class, so there's no need to worry, all right?" He probably meant that rhetorically, but it didn't stop Takanibu from answering. "Despite not being hero students, 5 of us were already caught up in an attack meant for the hero class. Not to mention that they are studying to be heroes. They aren't heroes yet. They don't even have provisional licenses. No one could speak against the accusations. They might not have even thought about that when they were gushing over how cool they were for defeating the villains." Present Mike sounded. "If you have any issues, then you might want to speak with the principal, as he was the one to give the go-ahead." Takanibu nodded, though he didn't seem all that satisfied with the shifting of blame. "Anyway, the sports festival is designed to showcase the best that students from all courses have to offer. The business and management course use this time to come up with campaigns and sell things. The support course get to show if their creations to potential business partners, and of course the hero course students get to show off for hero agencies for their work week. General studies doesn't have a focus like the other classes, however, should you prove yourself out there, you have the opportunity to join one of the other classes after the festival. It also works the other way around with those who can't prove their worth being moved here. If you don't want to participate, then that's all right, but you have to go speak to the principal about it." With the sports festival out of the way, Present Mike was able to move on to the English lesson. The lesson though still held a tension that had stuck around from Takanibu's observations. The whole class seemed to drift into a mood that followed them through their morning classes, with even the different teachers becoming infected despite not knowing anything. The lunch bell rang and broke the spell that hung over Class 1E. Though instead of heading towards the cafeteria like normally did, Hitoshi went in the opposite direction towards the 1A classrooms. "Where are you going? If we don't go now, we won't get a seat," you're asked in confusion. I'm going to go declare war on 1A and let them know that I'm going to get into hero course after the festival of course. Hitoshi shrugged. You're declaring war on them? No way you're making yourself into a target, she choked out. Interesting. I think I'll join you. After all, I would like to see those I had to fight alongside. Takanibu thought aloud. Not you, to Yuri. Your turn, to him dramatically. Fine then, if you two are going, then all of us should, she added. I could just get you us a table, Midoriya offered, pointing discreetly in the direction of the cafeteria. No way. Either all of us go or none of us do, she disagreed, folding her arms. We can protect you from asshole McJerkface if that's what you're worried about. Midoriya shuddered but hesitantly nodded, and together they headed to Class 1A, only to find that other people seemed to have the same idea and had blocked the entire corridor. Being himself, Hitoshi proceeded to push his way to the front with Yurka, Takanibu, and Midoriya close behind. They weren't quite able to hear the quiet deceleration of war, but did hear a guy from the other heroics class about not being one-upped. It was all rather disorienting for Midoriya, who had just wanted to sit down and eat lunch with the friends he was finally able to make and forget about everything for a bit. Typical Bakugo threw out insults at everyone, though it seemed different this time, like there was something more to just being his normal angry attitude. The boy with spiky red hair, Midoriya, unfortunately never caught his name when they met, was calling it a manly speech, whatever that meant, while the rest of the students seemed somewhat skeptical. The Anger's blonde then noticed him cowering behind Hitoshi and glared daggers, but didn't say anything as he shoved his way through the crowd. Apparently Bakugo wasn't the only one to notice his presence, as noticed other students looking at him and his friends. Midoriya, the strict-looking one with engines on his legs, started. If it is not too much trouble, I would like to invite you sit with some of us for lunch today. Of course your friends can join in as well. We wish to talk if that is all right with you. Midoriya flushed at the attention but turned to Hitoshi. When he turned to look at Yuri and Takanibu, he saw that Yuri had her thumbs up and was smiling while Takanibu shrugged, looking back at the strict boy, and nodded shyly. Excellent. I suggest that we meet up outside after getting lunch, since there will be quite a few of us and I doubt that there will be any tables left that would be able to accommodate all of us. It made sense, and he nodded again in understanding before the 4 from 1E headed off for the decreasing crowd and towards the cafeteria. Once there they spotted both Kazuo and Soda looking for seats. Calling the over, they explained what the guy from 1A said. I think he wishes to speak to us regarding the USJ incident, so they are probably expecting you as well, Takanibu explained. Cool, I guess we'll see you guys down there. It's way too crowded here now to even find, Kazuo replied before leaving with Soda just behind him. By the time everyone was able to meet up outside, a third of the lunch period had passed, and it looked like that strict guy was ready to reprimand them before stopping himself and inviting them over. From the looks of it, most of Class 1A was there. Obviously Bakugo wasn't there, and Midoriya couldn't help but feel relieved at that. Greetings. Now that we are all here, I'd like it if we could all introduce ourselves in an orderly fashion. I am Tenya Iida, the current class president of Class 1A. The strict, Iida introduced himself. It is a pleasure to meet you. My name is Momo Yaoyorozu, the vice president of Class 1A. The one that had given him the first aid kit introduced. Ochako Uraraka here, it's nice to meet ya. It was a girl with short brown hair and chubby cheeks this time. I'm Toru Hagakuri. He had to look a bit to notice the floating uniform with waving arms and felt a little bad for not noticing earlier. Mashirao Ojiro, the blonde with the muscly tail, added, though he seemed a little distracted by the invisible girl next to him. My name is Yuga Aoyama, and I must say that what you did to that villain was most attention-grabbing. The boy directed a wink at him, and he couldn't tell if the blonde was joking or not. Mina Ishido at your service. The girl with pink skin grinned cheekily. I'm Denki Kaminari. If he remembered correctly, then this guy had a quirk that allowed him to communicate? Maybe something with electricity? Kyoka Jiro. He noticed the girl twirling the jack that connected to her earlobes and wondered how they worked. It was really manly of you to help Mr. Aizawa like that, Eijiro Kirishima by the way. The spiky red head smiled and waved. Honta Siro. Nice to meet you. The boy had odd-looking elbows and he had to resist asking about them. Shoto Todoroki. A cold voice was next and he recognized it from when they were in the landslide zone together. Suyu Asui, but call me Su, was the last one from 1A and she had features similar to a frog. He wished he'd brought his notebook to write notes, but it was currently in the classroom. Not to mention they'd probably think he was rude even if he did have it. Shiso Hitoshi. I wasn't at USJ, but someone needs to make sure my classmates don't die. It was a sarcastic remark. He was able to tell since he'd spent so long around the boy, but it looked like some of 1A didn't understand and were offended. Yurisa Sato, and don't expect me to forgive Bakago for what he did to my friend, but otherwise, nice to meet ya. As always she was over the top and he had to resist cringing at the nickname. Apparently 1A thought it was funny, with most covering the snickers while the rest full on laughed. We cannot apologize on his behalf and I do not expect forgiveness for his actions, and as class president I shall do whatever I can to decrease any risk he may pose to you. Iida replied formally and Yuri nodded approvingly. Iwai Kazuo. I guess it's nice to meet you all, he shrugged. My name's Chihori Soda. I hope we can be friends. Soda smiled, trying his best to make sure her quirk didn't make her look predatory, though they seemed to understand or not notice. Yukamura Takanibu, a pleasure. The boy introduced almost in monotone. Mi Midoriya Aizuku, he said, his name almost sticking in his throat. The sheer amount of people paying attention to him was starting to make him nervous, causing him to shift ever so slightly behind Hitoshi. Iida again began to talk. It is a pleasure to meet you all. We were all curious about you when Mr. Aizawa told us that you would also be coming on the trip. However, with the interference of Bakugo and then the attack, it was impossible to get to know each other. No talking about quirks though. Hitoshi interrupted, much to Iida's protest. I believe that he meant the likelihood of us facing off against each other in the sports festival is too high since we do not know that the events will be. Takanibu intervened before an argument could break out. That's understandable. Yaoyorozu nodded. The less the enemy knows, the higher the chance of winning. Am I correct? Precisely. Takanibu replied, almost impressed if he had to guess. He was a little disappointed, but he could always take notes during the festival or after if he was still participating. I don't mean to sound rude or anything, but I couldn't help but notice that there were only 19 members of your class while we were headed to USJ. I was going to ask then, but, you know the rest. Kazuo interrupted his thoughts. Mr. Aizawa expelled him on the first day. Ribbit, Asu replied. At their confusion, Mina spoke up. It was totally crazy. We missed orientation so that we could have the quirk assessment, and Mr. Aizawa said that whoever placed last was going to be expelled. No way? Are they allowed to even do that? Yuri gasped. Apparently so. Yaoyorozu sighed. At first I believed it was simply something to make us work harder, but Okura wasn't able to do much with his quirk. Magnet I believe it was, and placed last before being sent home. I heard that Mr. Aizawa expelled a whole class 1 year because they didn't reach his standard. Uraraka added with a shiver. What I don't understand is how Mr. Aizawa hasn't expelled Mineta yet. Sue almost groaned. Yay, he's such a pervert. I caught him trying to look up my skirt the other day. Mina actually groaned. Does he happen to be about this tall? Soda indicated about 100 centimeters off the ground, purple balls for hair, and a weird voice. All the 1A girls nodded with varying levels of disgust on their faces. Ew, gross. I've seen that guy hanging around the girls' locker room more than once. How is he even in the hero course? Yuri twisted her face. I overheard Mr. Aizawa saying to present Mike that because no one is formally reporting it and the guy's passing all the tests, he doesn't have a good excuse to expel. Meaning that if his family chooses, they could sue the school. Ojiro sighed. So's that what happened to Okura? Uraraka asked. Yes, in the guide for teachers it states that those in the hero course are allowed to be expelled if they do not pass a test. Considering that it was a quirk test, Mr. Aizawa was indeed allowed to expel Okura without any legal issues. Iida informed them. Oh, may I ask how you know this? Takanibu inquired curiously. Why, of course. My brother was invited to be a teacher here. He ended up declining so that he can continue running his agency. Takanibu looked almost thoughtful for a second before nodding. Dude, does that mean your brother is a pro hero? Kirishima asked excitedly. A hint of red dusted Ida's cheeks at the question. Why indeed, I come from a long line of heroes. My brother happens to be the turbo hero Ingenium. Dude, Kirishima exclaimed. He was desperate to take notes now. Hitoshi seems to notice and gave him a deadpan stare that had him turning away in embarrassment. 2 weeks had passed since the sports festival announcement and the lunch with Class 1A, and it was now the morning of the sports festival. Since then his little group of friends expanded to include Soda and Kazuo, who joined them for lunch every day. Every now and then some of the 1A students also joined them, and surely enough he was becoming more and more comfortable with them. They were even introduced to Fumikage Tokiyami, Koji Koda, Mezzo Shoji, and Rikido Sato. He'd also taken to training more than usual. He knew he wasn't up to the same level of strength as the heroes in training, but this would hopefully add a little more to make his life easier. A meeting with the principal also occurred where he was asked if he truly wanted to participate, and if so, what's there anything he needed to protect himself. It felt a little unfair that he was the only one getting this talk, but it was probably because his quirk did a lot of damage to himself. Now it was their moment to shine. The other classes universe them alphabetically had already been introduced, and now it was their turn. Overall they prov slide did T seem too impressive next to the support or hero departments, kind of blending in with the management department, but soon they would shine and hopefully he and Hitoshi would prove themselves and go to join the hero course. On the stage in front of them stood Midnight going on about something he was too nervous to properly listen to. So it was a shock when Bakugo was called on stage. In hindsight it did make sense considering Bakugo came first during the heroics entrance exams. I pledge to be number 1. It honestly wasn't even a surprise at this point. It did however lack the mocking laughter he'd normally associate with the explosive blonde. Did something happen he wasn't aware of? The boos and jeering of the other students was expected. Even other members of 1A didn't appreciate the targets they now had on their backs. Thankfully Midnight was able to get everything under control so she could announce the first part. The first event is an obstacle race. Midnight announced. Starting over there you will be racing around the arena. As for the rules, no leaving the designated track, but other than that do whatever you want. She cracked her whip signaling that everyone should head to the starting point. The countdown was dramatic, intense, fitting for UA but nerve-wracking nonetheless. Everyone was aiming to be number 1 and the tension was thick enough to but cut with a knife. The timer countered down before opening the gates. Students from all the courses flooded through, getting stuck in the narrow passageway that lead to the actual track. Luckily he had been near the back, meaning that he wasn't currently stuck like most of the students. Unfortunately that left him behind everyone else and therefore at a disadvantage. The only option was to climb over the other students. He didn't like the idea very much, but he wasn't the only one to think of it. The first student he climbed up protested loudly, but he was already jumping on the shoulders of the next person before any form of retaliation could occur. The closer he got to the exit the less protests he received and the colder it became. Turned out that the ones in the front had their shoes frozen to the ground, probably thanks to Todoroki. Ahead he could see the ice track with much of the hero course already making good progress. Landing on the ice from the shoulders of other students wasn't easy and he did end up slipping and falling, though it didn't really matter now that he was free of the passageway. It was a slippery start, but the ice thinning just like the number of weird purple balls. He didn't even want to know what those were for. Ahead of him were most of the heroic students battling robots that according to Present Mike were used in the entrance exams. Probably why Eraserhead made him do the general studies exam instead. His smaller stature allowed him to duck and weave through the separate ongoing battles, though he did stop to pick up some scrap that could be useful later. Some of the wires were thankfully still attached to the sheet so he could fasten it to himself. The next obstacles in the race looked an awful lot like a canyon with rope connecting the edges to pillars like a puzzle to find the quickest route. This was going to be difficult, but he didn't want to give up the medal just yet, not until the final obstacle. He grabbed the nearest rope that wasn't coated in ice and began to crawl with his back to the seemingly bottomless pit. It took a while, but he was finally at the final obstacle in his way. A minefield that when activated caused loud and colorful explosions. It looked like he'd managed to leave quite a few people behind, and way out in front he could spot the explosions from Bakugo's quirk. That was when he had an idea. If he could move the mines to create one big explosion, the momentum might be able to carry him to the finish line. He could feel the stare as people passed him, but he couldn't think about that unless he wanted all his hard work to go to waste. The scrap metal proved useful in digging up the mines from below and transporting them into one spot. Thought the best part would be that he could use it as a makeshift sled to protect himself from the massive explosion he was about to detonate. One deep breath later and it went off, sending past almost everyone as he descended around the two front runners, Bakugo and Todoroki. The two weren't fighting each other anymore, more focused on making sure he didn't overtake them. Thanks to that, however, he was able to use their backs as a platform while he used the scrap metal to hit the mines below them, sending him forward and the other two to the side. Rolling to absorb the impact, he then forced himself up and faster as Bakugo's explosions roared behind him. With his heartbeat drumming in his ears, he pushed towards the finish line and hoped that it was all enough. And the winner of the first round is Izuku Midoriya. The applause from the crowd was what brought him back to reality. He'd done it. He had won first place, and he wasn't even a heroics student. Despite the crowd, he was vaguely aware of the footsteps behind him, though he didn't want to risk turning around and seeing Bakugo's angered face. Instead, he stood there waiting for others to come to him. Eventually, everyone did cross the finish line in one way or another. Surprisingly, it was Takanibu that came up to him first. "Congratulations on coming first, you must be proud." Thanks. "I'm worried though," he confessed. "Would this happen to be about Bakugo? I can assure you that he will not be pulling anything while in the eyes of the public." It was a little awkward. Takanibu didn't seem the type to know how to comfort people, and it showed. However, oddly enough, it worked. Despite the nagging in his head that told him to run and hide, he nodded and looked to Midnight to see what the next event would be. "Congratulations to everyone for finishing. However, only the top 42 have made it to the next round. To the rest of you, better luck next year," Midnight announced with a wink. "The next event will be the Cavalry Battle. In teams with a maximum of 4 people, your objective will be to capture the headbands of other teams. Depending on your placement during the first game, you'll be awarded a certain number of points. The person who ranked 42nd will be awarded 5 points, with each person above them being awarded 5 more. For example, the 41st would have 10 points, 40th would get 15, and so on. The one exception is the first ranked with 10 million points." Suddenly, he didn't feel all too well with all attention on him. How was he supposed to find a team now? Everyone was already beginning to form teams. Hitoshi seemed to already have a team consisting of Class 1A and 1B students, though he wondered if they were brainwashed. Yuri, Takanibu, and Kazuo placed after 42nd, but Soda. He looked around and saw her also trying to find a team. On his way over, he was intercepted by a girl with pink dreadlocks and lots of gear. "Mr. 10 Million, team up with me," the girl exclaimed, shocking him. "Everyone in the stadium will be looking at you, and that means the big support companies will see my babies," the girl went on as if there was nothing wrong. Sure, if why you really want to," he was able to respond a few seconds later. "You're funny, Mr. 10 Million. Mei Hatsume at your service," she introduced herself. "Now, who do you have in mind for the rest of the team?" "I was about to ask my classmate if Shishiwan wanted to." Unfortunately, Soda had turned them down as she'd already agreed to team up with others, though she did apologize for it. It was a little disheartening that he couldn't team up with her. Next on his list was Uraraka. Then they would need someone with another well-rounded quirk, but that could be saved till after Uraraka. "Place please, will you be on my team?" he managed to ask. Man, was his stuttering bad. "Sure." He perked up and gave a wobble smile before looking around. Awkwardly off to the side stood Tokiyami, and it fell into place. Tokiyami also agreed, and they could start planning. We should explain our quirks, he'd suggested. That way we can strategize PR properly. I'll go first, Hatsume enthusiastically volunteered. My quirk, Zoom, lets me see things that are up to 5 kilometers away. However, because I'm from the support course, I was allowed to bring my wonderful babies to show off. Like this jetpack and rocket boots, and a bunch more. Well, when I touch something I can cancel its gravity and make it float. Uraraka explained using Hatsume as an example. I can also return the gravity like this. But I get sick if I float myself or something is too heavy. She added with a small clap of her hands. Dark Shadow is basically an extension of myself and can many things and in good for both offense and defense, though I suspect you already knew that considering that you picked me for your team. However, what you might not know is that my quirk is weaker during the day or exposed to light, but the opposite is true during the night or when it is dark. Tokiyami called upon Dark Shadow, who gave a thumbs up. My Q quirk won't be useful. It's called illusion and Bob. Basically when I make eye contact I show someone their worst fears. And I see them too. He shuffled awkwardly when Uraraka gasped and flinched when he felt a hand on his shoulder. I am glad that you shared your quirk with us. If you would like, we can keep it a secret, especially with everything that happened with Bakugo. Tokiyami reassured and he nodded, not really trusting his voice. Bakugo. Uraraka snickered after a couple moments. Well, I don't really know what that was about, but Mr. 10 Million, do you have a plan? Hatsume dismissed before grinning. He looked at each of his teammates and took a deep breath. Currently we hold the advantage. We don't have to go after anyone. Uraraka CA can cancel the gravity on the three of us while she uses Hatsume's boots. Tokiyami C can be the vanguard with Hatsume on the R right and Uraraka on the left. If that's alright. He Andy's up, trailing off nervously with the attention. You're really smart, aren't you? Uraraka asked, shocking him. Should like a good plan, I'm in. I don't really care what we do as long as my babies can shine, Hatsume supported. Indeed, I agree with this plan. However, you should be on the watch for especially Todoroki's and Bakugo's team. I doubt you need the reminder though. Tokiyami added. Yay, we can totally do this. Uraraka cheered with Hatsume joining in. On your marks, get set, go, Midnight exclaimed, and in an instant the playing field was a mess with quirks. The ground beneath them was growing softer and he saw the student responsible almost immediately. There was no time for hesitation if they wanted to keep all their points and win. You Uraraka, Hatsume. Look away. He barely managed to move their heads before he turned on the jetpack Hatsume provided and taking flight. Thanks to Uraraka's quirk making them weigh nothing, they were able to easily make their way out of the softening ground and escape into the air. However, it wasn't over yet. They still have the whole 15 minutes left to avoid everyone. To Tokiyami, he was able to warn just as Jiru's Jack came headed towards them. He knew that most of the teams would be coming after them, but this was just too many. Out of all the other teams he could only spot 2 going around picking up the headbands of other teams. Soon enough Bakugo was propelling himself towards them with his explosions, his team abandoned on the ground. Dark Shadow took the blast, but with what Tokiyami said, they shouldn't rely on Dark Shadow for this sort of thing. But for now it kept Bakugo away, who was retrieved by his own team. They were able to avoid most other teams by keeping to the air, especially with one of their previous pursuers now distracted in an attempt to retrieve their own stolen headband. The biggest challenge now would be Todoroki's team. With Iida, Yaoyorozu, and Kaminari as the horse, they were a team not to take lightly. However, he'd noticed something. Todoroki has only used ice, which has only come from his right side. It was something that he had yet to understand about Todoroki. From the boy's appearance it would seem as though he had 2 quirks mixed into one, yet he'd only seen Todoroki use ice. Stay on his right, he whispered to his team. Both Tokiyami and Uraraka seemed to understand while Hatsume just looked a little confused but complied. The final minutes were now being counted down as his team managed to be caught between walls of ice, the air no longer being a safe haven for them after they had stepped on a purple ball that had looked like a piece of Mineta's hair and had broken the rocket boots Uraraka had been wearing. So far they'd managed to stay on Todoroki's right, and he could see the frustration building in the dual-haired teen. It had come from nowhere. One moment they were successfully on the opposing team's right, and the next, Todoroki's team was behind them with their 10 million plus point headband. The sound of shattering glass brought his attention to the ground where his glasses lay shattered. He'd have to worry about that later and hope he didn't make eye contact. We have to get it back, he declared, the team turning to face Team Todoroki as he made sure to stare at the ground. There were only a few seconds left. Iida seemed incapable of using his quirk properly, and they were closing in. Team Todoroki was unable to escape as he finally raised his head to look at the headbands around Todoroki's neck. However, as he grabbed the top band, his eyes met Todoroki's and fear filled him before his vision went black. A man with fiery red hair and a beard actually made of fire. A man he recognized as the second-ranked hero Endeavor, beating a young child with dual-colored hair flashed before his eyes before morphing into a woman with white hair and boiling water. He felt sick watching before the cruel voice of Endeavor rang in his head. You will never escape. You are just like me. The vision ended and he felt sick. He wanted to throw up. There was no way what he saw was just a fear. It explained too much. Why Todoroki didn't use fire. Why Todoroki had that scare on his face. Maybe it was why Todoroki didn't seem to like Takanibu when they met during the USJ attack. The sounding of the alarm brought him back into reality. Hatsume was trying to catch his attention to tell him to look at the headband. He didn't turn to look at her, not wanting to accidentally use his quirk again. Instead he turned to look at the headband. It was only worth 70 points. He'd failed. He'd failed the people that believed that he could do this. Failed the people who thought he could win. Midoriya. Tokiyami's voice brought him out of his downward spiral and brought his attention to a second headband that currently resided in Dark Shadow's jaw. It was thanks to you distracting Todoroki that I was able to retrieve the one that resided on his head. He felt like crying. Thanks to Tokiyami's quick thinking, they were able to advance to the next round in 4th place. After all, he was the one that fell for Todoroki's trick of mixing up the headbands. With the second event over with, the lunch break began, giving the students who were participating in the final event some time to prepare. The last event was the same for every year level and was a tradition: one-on-one battles. He had been planning on finding Recovery Girl and asking for some spare glasses considering his broke during the last seconds of the cavalry battle. Thankfully he'd been able to avoid eye contact with everyone and therefore avoided using his quirk. However, there was one person that he wasn't able to shake before finding Recovery Girl, and that was Todoroki. The dual-haired teen had cornered him in a quiet area of the backstage area but had yet to speak till now. You saw it, didn't you? Todoroki questioned coldly. It was easy to guess what the teen was referring to, yet it was no less intimidating. What exactly is your quirk? He refused to look into Todoroki's eyes no matter how the teen tried to get his attention. It's called illusion. I can see pay people's worst fears when I make eye contact. It was only fair that Todoroki knew since the teen had been a victim of it. I see. So you saw everything I did back then. Todoroki went quiet like he was hesitant to go on. Why yay. It's why I wear glasses. When you grabbed the headband, my glasses came off and yeah. He trailed off considering Todoroki knew what happened after all that. The two stayed quiet for a while after that, Todoroki seemingly lost in thought while he was feeling too awkward to add anything else. He wondered if he could sneak off and find Recovery Girl before Todoroki noticed he was gone, but the idea was killed off when Todoroki spoke next. Say, do you know what a quirk marriage is? Todoroki asked suddenly. He nodded his head. I do. I'm guessing that's what happened. He was quickly becoming uncomfortable with the topic. My father, the second-ranked hero Endeavor, used his power to arrange a marriage between him and my mother by bribing her family. His goal was to have an offspring that would be able to surpass All Might as the #1 hero. Todoroki paused. To him, I am his masterpiece. The perfect blend of their quirks, but everything he did to have me drove my mother insane. After my quirk manifested, I found her in the kitchen. The very sight of my left half scared her to the point where she poured boiling water over my face. Todoroki was now cupping the scar with his hand as if covering it would make it go away. She called my left side hideous. After that I vowed to never use my left side so I wouldn't become like him. Yet your quirk, it made me remember things I'd wished to forget. Why are you telling me this? He couldn't understand. Todoroki was pouring his heart out and they barely knew each other. Not to mention he couldn't find it within himself to understand all of it. Sure, he'd been through his own share of abuse while at school, but after so long of not having a quirk made him think differently. I'm not sure myself. I guess there's something about you that makes me think that you'd understand, Todoroki mused. He gave a heavy sigh, shoulders sagging. Todoroki had just spilled the beans on his past, maybe he could do the same. You're right about that. He paused, not too sure how far he wanted to go with his story. Do you know what life is like for quirkless people? It was perhaps the first sentence he hadn't in years, yet it felt like he wasn't even fully connected with his body. I can't say that I do. Todoroki confessed, obviously confused as to why they were now talking about quirklessness. Not everyone is created equal. Only 20% of the world's population is quirkless. I learned this when I was 4 years old, when I was diagnosed as quirkless. The disconnected feeling continued and he spoke like he was rehearsing a speech. He barely even resisted the sharp intake from Todoroki. I'd only received my quirk when I was 10, after I'd tried to kill myself. That's how quirkless people are treated. One of the first thoughts I had when I woke up was that I couldn't even kill myself correctly. How pathetic. He couldn't seem to reconnect himself back to his body. It was like he was numb all over. No fear, no anger, nothing. He couldn't even fully take in Todoroki's reaction to his own confession. Maybe if he was stronger he'd be able to. It was time for the final event, and those who'd made it past the other two events were crowded around the stage where Midnight was about to announce who would be facing who. Thankfully he was able to retentive some spare glasses from Recovery Girl, who'd apparently had a stock for heroic students who broke their glasses. Except she was interrupted by someone wishing to withdraw. If he remembered right, then it was Ojiro from 1A that wanted to. Another from 1B followed after, with their reasoning being that they didn't remember the second event and therefore didn't feel like they were qualified for the final event. He shot a look at Hitoshi, who simply shrugged before turning his attention back to Midnight, who allowed the withdrawals and replaced them with 2 students from the team that placed 5th in the cavalry battle. He didn't know the names of the 2 Class 1B students, and from the looks of the matchups, it didn't matter too much as he was firstly facing Hitoshi. Should he win that round, he'd be up against Todoroki. That was the match he was worried about, considering he didn't have a combat-oriented quirk and Todoroki knew what his quirk was. Either way, he didn't have much time to think on it, as his match with Hitoshi was the first of the round and he was sure that the battle was going to be mostly quirkless, considering they both knew each other's quirks. Hitoshi wouldn't be able to control him if he didn't respond, and Hitoshi knew he wouldn't use his quirk. Briefly he wondered how the audience would react to such an underwhelming battle in a tournament for the supposed best and brightest upcoming heroes. The thought caused him to falter, gaining him a couple concerned looks from others nearby. As soon as everyone had a couple minutes to look over the matches, it was time for the start of the first round. Him and Hitoshi facing off against one another in possibly the most boring match of the tournament. It wasn't long before everyone else was out of the way and heading to their preferred places to watch. Now, are you ready, kids? Present Mike called out over the loudspeaker. He gulped, his nerves trying to get the better of him. Aye, Captain. Hitoshi mumbled so that only he could hear. He wanted to gape at his friend and ask what he was doing. Thankfully he didn't, as Present Mike called for the match to start. You know only one of us is winning this, right? Hitoshi started. He knew not to respond, no matter how casually Hitoshi said anything. Now I wonder which one of us it will be. The two of them ran at each other, punching and dodging. It was a stalemate really, with Hitoshi's quirk useless and him refusing to use his own. I wonder, will it be the kid with the villainous brainwashing quirk or the one that's scared of their own quirk? It was all a ruse to get him to speak, but it was really tempting. For someone with a powerful quirk, you really are a nervous wreck. It makes no sense really. The probing was really starting to get to him as tears began to build behind his eyes. Was this really how Hitoshi felt about him, or was it just a ploy, playing on his insecurities to make him talk? I can just imagine what people say about people like you. That hit way too close to home. It made him want to rip his hair out and scream at Hitoshi for saying that to him. Then again, his friend doesn't know. If he wanted to make the torment stop, he had to win, and now. Even as the tears began to roll down his face, he didn't let up on the barrage punches, even throwing in a few kicks here and there to mix it up. It was then that he found his opening. Hitoshi was too focused on trying to make him talk that his punches were getting sloppy. Dodging out of the way, he grabbed Hitoshi's outstretched arm with both hands, pivoted his body and pulled Hitoshi over his shoulder and over the boundary line. And the first one into the second round is Izuku Midoriya. Present Mike announced as confused cheering filled the stadium. I don't think you can imagine the things people have said to me. He whispered to Hitoshi before leaving his friend. Was Hitoshi still his friend now? He was currently hiding from just about anyone. He didn't want to hear their congratulations on making it to the second round or have them ask why his eyes were red and puffy. Least of all, he wanted to see Hitoshi. Logically, he knew that the boy was just trying to get under his skin and make him talk, but emotionally, it felt like a knife to the back. Maybe it was his fault for not saying that his quirk was an especially sore spot. Then again, he remembers talking about quirks earlier and saying he didn't want to talk about it. Was he just overreacting? He'd never really had friends before. Were boundaries something you were supposed to discuss? Either way, hiding here wasn't doing him any good. He didn't even really know where he was or if he was even really allowed to be there. His next match was against Todoroki and he didn't even know when that would be, and it would stay that way if he stayed here. No matter how tempting that was. He didn't want to be a bother to anyone that would eventually go looking for him either. He could just see the light from the afternoon sun when a shadow blocked his view. Stumbling back in surprise, he noticed that the number 2 hero Endeavor had come out in front of him. He'd apparently been noticed as Endeavor had turned to look at him. You're the one that beat my Shoto during the obstacle race, Endeavor had pointed out in an accusing tone. Fearing that his voice would give out, he simply nodded in response. A fluke. You're nothing but a pebble in Shoto's way to beating all might. The number 2 hero huffed, pushing past, purposefully bumping into him. He felt the flames of the hero's costume lick uncomfortably at his skin, almost a reminder of explosions that had probably singed his skin year ago. You aren't the first to speak to me like that. He'd caught the man's attention. He couldn't stop now, no matter how much his throat wanted to seal itself shut. The same person wants to be a hero too. They also told me to kill myself. I hope for Shoto's sake you aren't a bully too. He felt the heat before he heard the roaring of angry flames. While the rational part of his brain told him that the hero wouldn't be able to hurt him without getting into a lot of trouble, the part of him that was still scarred made him flinch as he gathered the strength to run. Once outside and away from Endeavor, his eyes began to leak once more, something he didn't think was actually possible. He leaned against the outside wall of the arena, not really knowing where he was, though he doubted that it was anywhere near the front entrance, considering he couldn't hear the sounds of any people. At this point he couldn't care less if he missed his fight with Todoroki. There was just no time for him to calm down. The pessimistic thought that he wouldn't have been able to do anything was just the icing on the cake of his mood. Maybe if he was away long enough they would just all forget about him till it was time to go home. Unlikely as it was, he still just wanted to be left alone. Something that wasn't going to happen if the footsteps getting closer had anything to say about it. Midoriya. The voice was muffled and familiar. Looking up, he was rather surprised to see Eraserhead, still covered in bandages, standing before him. Midoriya. Everyone's looking for you. Your match was 5 minutes ago. They moved it back while a bunch of heroes went looking for you. I'm sorry for troubling everyone. He managed to apologize, looking away. You're not in trouble. Eraserhead sighed. Everyone's worried with what happened at USJ. Sorry. Neither of them spoke for a minute before the underground hero spoke again, though not to him. I've found him. He's safe. He's withdrawing from the tournament though. He looked up to see Eraserhead talking into what looked like a small radio. So, are you going to tell me what happened or do I have to drag it out of you? He couldn't help the small flinch as he'd hoped the hero wouldn't ask. For a while he stayed quiet, unsure of where to start. Should he start while what Hitoshi had said to him during the match? Did the hero even really care about his feelings? What about what Todoroki had said to him? And what was he to do about Endeavor? Stop. I can hear you thinking from here, Eraserhead said, pausing his thoughts, getting down beside him. Your classmates came and found me after your fight and told me that some things had been said during the battle and you reacted badly. Why not start there? He started after nodding. He said things that made me remember things I wanted to forget. And I guess I overreacted. He trailed off. From what you've told me, you've had a difficult past. After coming here and probably just starting to get over everything, my best guess is that he had brought up a sensitive topic and you reacted defensively. There is no need to feel bad about it. Sure, your classmates might not know the whole story, but it's still up to them to apologize if they do wrong by you. He looked up at the underground hero, tears in his eyes, and wondered if this was actually real. No one other than his mother has truly been there for him. Was it all right for him to hope that he wasn't dreaming? I'm guessing that something else happened between then and now. You don't seem the type to skip out on events like this for a fight between friends. Eraserhead added when he didn't say anything. Well, during the second event, IU used my key Quirk onto Todoroki. He tensed, waiting for the verbal backlash he thought he was going to receive. When nothing happened, he relaxed a little before continuing. I saw some things he didn't want me to see. We talked. He told me about what I saw and I told him a little about me. And what you saw, was it something that I as his homeroom teacher and a hero should know about? Eraserhead asked, almost leaning in as he spoke. He bit his bottom lip, not hard enough to bleed but rather sting a little, before nodding. I see. We can talk about him later though. Right now we're talking about you. Eraserhead seemed to shake off his own interest quickly. Did anything else happen? I ran into an Endeavor. His breath hitched as he felt pressure build up behind his eyes once more. He said somethings and my head kept going back into what Todoroki said and what I saw. How about I take you home? I'll get Sekijiro, you probably know him as the Blood Hero. Vlad King, to drive us there and I'll talk to your mother about what happened. Eraserhead offered. It didn't take too long for him to think it over. Home sounded like a good place to be right now, so he nodded. By the time the sports festival had officially ended, he'd been in bed trying to sleep the stress of the day away. Eraserhead and the Blood Hero had dropped him off and had stayed for a cup of tea and to make sure that he was all right. They had told him to take the rest of the week off if he needed it and if he needed more time to just call. While he was desperate for a nap, his mind wouldn't stop running over time. Thinking of how he'd destroyed his friendship with Hitoshi, let his other friends down, and ruined everything. A small rational part of his brain told him that he hadn't ruined anything, but it was basically a whisper in the overbearing negativity in his mind. He raised his head at the soft knock on his door and watched as the door slowly opened and his mother entered. Hey sweetie, I know it's been a hard day. Is there anything you want for dinner? The normalcy of the question dulled the pounding in his mind but not enough to think of an answer, so he shrugged. How about Katsudon then? We can eat in front of the TV and watch a movie. Her suggestion sounded as good as any at the moment, so he nodded. Okay, then I'll come back when dinner is ready. He really did love his mother. She was the best mom he could have asked for. Though he wanted to know what happened after he left the sports festival. It was obvious him mom would have taped it. The question was if the recording continued even after he left. If it didn't, he might have to wait till videos were released on the internet. Even then, would his mother mind if he watched? Unfortunately, he wasn't sure he'd be allowed or if watching would cause more problems. His thinking made him lose track of time without realizing it till his mom knocked on the door to tell him dinner was ready. Following behind, his blanket was wrapped around his shoulders and trailed along the ground behind him. Once sat on the couch, The coffee table was brought forward and 2 bowls of pork katsudon were placed on it. He watched his mother pick out one of his favorite movies as a kid, The Incredibles. It was a pretty old movie, one that came out when quirkless people still outnumbered the quirked. However, the movie was a classic with great plot and characters. He leaned back and ate slowly, engrossed in the animated movie. Unfortunately, he'd fallen asleep near the end of the film. Katsudon only half finished, and unaware of him, Mum laying him down on the couch and tucking another blanket around him. Monday morning, and it was the first time he had felt like calling in sick and staying home from UA. His nerves were getting the better of him, especially after taking Eraserhead's advice and taking the rest of last week off. Against his mother's wishes, he had spent last night watching clips from the sports festival, and seeing Hitoshi lose to Todoroki hadn't been surprising, considering that Todoroki didn't seem to be the type to easily talk even when pushed. Bakugo had then gone and won the whole tournament, but still protested the gold medal a bit. "Sweetie, I know you want to stay home, but you've been so much better since starting UA. I can't let you throw that away by staying home all the time again," his mother had said when he asked if he could stay home. He knew she was right and he wasn't thinking logically, but it still stung a little to hear out loud. "Would you feel better if I went with you today?" He nodded and had a small smile to his mum, who began to hum as she began to get ready to go with him. It was weird how the moral support of having her on his trip to UA made him feel better, but there was no way he was going to question the feeling in case it went away. He missed feeling okay. These past few days were hard and he was glad for being able to emotionally recharge. But now the hardest part was actually returning and seeing everyone again. "All right, sweetie, are you ready to get going?" his mother asked, and he again nodded. Together they headed off to the train station, a 5-minute walk from their building. Once they were on the train, it was a 20-minute ride before another 10-minute walk to school from the station. All around them, UA students walked to school in groups of mainly 2s or 3s. In the distance he thought he saw the distinct hair of Todoroki, but it was only a flash, so there was no real way to be sure. "All right, sweetie. I can't go any further than here. I'll see you when you get home, okay?" He gave her a tight hug and was tempted to not let go, even as he heard a few snickers from students he didn't know. Walking into class, he saw that he wasn't the first to arrive. The few there that spotted him congratulated him and hoped that he was feeling better now. He was, however, the first of what probably was their friend group. His insides twisted and his imagination began running wild, thinking if ways he could be rejected. Before his mind could get too far, though, Yuri walked in. "Midoriya, you're okay," she exclaimed excitedly, almost running over to hug him. "We were so worried about you when President Mike said you had to leave early. You didn't even tell us you weren't feeling okay." She said all this while still clinging to him like an octopus, and he had trouble keeping up with everything she was saying. "Sato, you're going to hurt him if you continue." Takanibu spoke, surprising them both. "Yuki, call me Yuri," she huffed. "And don't you want to hug him too? It's been forever since we last saw him." An awful exaggeration, but yes. "Welcome back, Midoriya. I hope you are well." "Ah, why, yay. Thanks." He managed to get out once it was clear they were looking for an answer. "Good to hear. If you need anything, then don't hesitate to ask," Takanibu added before sitting at his own desk not too far away. The panic within him was starting to soothe. It was strange having so many people care about his well-being rather than berating him for his absence. What did he do to deserve friends like them? "Hey, do you know what's up with Hito?" Yuri asked after a couple seconds of silence, breaking him away from his spiraling thoughts. "Hi, Hito. Oh, that's what I'm calling Hitoshi now, isn't it cute?" She grinned. "I still need to come up with a nickname for you, but I'll do that later." "Oh, Hitoshi. I don't know," he replied, saddened. There was still the questions of if Hitoshi still wanted to be friends. "He's been acting weird since the tournament," all he said. After the fight, some lines were crossed and he didn't want to talk about it. She pouted and he began to feel guilty for causing this mess. Maybe he could sink into the floor before class started. If he remembered right, there was a student in 1B that could help him with that. However, it was too late to take drastic measures as President Mike walked into class with a loud greeting and Hitoshi entered just before the bell rang. Throughout class he could feel his friends looking at him, but he didn't have the courage to turn and face them yet. No doubt during lunch he'll be cornered and forced to talk. Somehow he was both dreading and looking forward to it, leaving his stomach in a mess of butterflies. He'd been correct in his assumption. Well, for the most part. Yuri, Takanibu, Kazuo, and Soda had come up to his desk almost impossibly fast, leaving him no time to properly think over what he was going to say. Luckily it seemed that he didn't have to say much. Midoriya, we're planning to eat lunch outside today and would like to know if you wanted to join. Takanibu spoke up, not giving Yuri the chance to talk. Eating outside did sound nice. Yee. He cut himself off when he spotted Hitoshi leaving the classroom with a tight expression. I'll see you out the re. They seemed reluctant to agree, but he assured them that he would be fine and he just needed to talk to Hitoshi alone. When they let him leave he thanked them before heading after Hitoshi, guessing where the other went. It wasn't too hard. The cafeteria was crowded and only getting louder by the second. Knowing Hitoshi like he did, knew that the quieter tables were his best bet. Finally, after going against the ever-moving tide of students, he spotted the signature purple hair of his friend. Hitoshi. He managed to call out. The boy in question looked at him in confusion. Is there something I can help you with? Hitoshi asked stiffly. He took a deep, calming breath. I want Ed to talk about what happened during the sports festival. I see. Hitoshi mumbled, looking away. I wanted to apologize for what I said. I was stressed and was thinking about stuff that I shouldn't have. He managed to apologize to a stunned Hitoshi. Why ain't you apologizing? I should be apologizing and begging for forgiveness. I said all those mean things to try and win. I made you drop out of the competition for crying out loud. Oh. That wasn't why your fault. I bumped into an endeavor and he. Yay. He tried to explain but none of the words were coming out. He didn't want to mention Todoroki as the other not had enough on his plate without him spreading rumors. I'm going to kill him. Hitoshi, heroes don't kill people, he protested. I know, but it wasn't very hero-like of him to antagonize a high school student. Hitoshi sighed. I still have to apologize for everything I said to you during our fight. You have every right to be nervous of your quirk and I exploited that in hopes of winning a meaningless contest. I hope you can forgive me. I also promise to try and be a much better friend in the future. He looked at his friend with Bush's tears and smiled brightly for the first time in a long time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, spam red hearts in comment box.